Only mode.
Welcome to AMSA's webinar titled Building Capacity Through Mentorship Programs. My name is Sabrina Ziegler and I am AMSA Sectoral Communications Coordinator, and I will be guiding us through today's webinar. We are joined by over 120 immigrant settlement agencies from across British Columbia and the western region of Canada who have joined us online for this learning experience. Our presenter today is Diane Lloyd. We are excited about the insight and knowledge that she will be bringing to today's webinar. Before we dive into the content of the webinar, let's go over a few areas of housekeeping. On the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar platform, you will find a control panel that can be expanded and collapsed by clicking on the orange arrow that you see in the slides. It is possible to expand the features within the control panel by clicking on the plus sign tab next to the title of each little area in that control panel. If you click the plus next to the audio tab, you have the option of listening to today's webinar via microphone and speakers through your computer, or clicking on the telephone function. Clicking on the telephone function will reveal a Canadian 647 number to call and an access code. The long-distance charges for listening via the phone will depend on your phone plan. We will be having 2 Q&A sessions throughout the webinar, one at the midway mark of the webinar and the other at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to type your questions in the chat box at any time, and our presenter will answer them during those designated times. If you require any technical assistance and are experiencing any technical difficulties, please contact our Settlement Events Coordinator, Tricia Oko, at events@amsa.org, or you can call her at 604-718-2783. Today's webinar will be recorded and we will be posting it to the AMSA website. We will send out a notification once it's been uploaded. Also, we sent out an email yesterday to everyone who was registered for the webinar that contained a handout for today's webinar. We would like to encourage you to use that handout for self-reflection, to review it for definitions, and to continue to use that handout as a starting point in those conversations on mentoring with your colleagues and within your agency. It is also possible to download the document during the webinar by clicking the plus sign next to the handout section on your control panel. The AMSA team will be live tweeting today's event. Join in the conversation online and follow the event using the hashtag AMSAEvents. AMSA's Twitter handle is @AMSABC, so feel free to submit your questions, participate in the discussion, and connect with other webinar participants using the hashtag. Our presenter today can also be found on Twitter at ResultsDiane. If you're watching today's webinar in a group, please tweet or email us the photo of your group watching today's webinar. We'd love to see everyone who's participating in the webinar today. And just briefly, what is AMSA? AMSA is a provincial association of organizations focused on immigrant, settlement and integration, diversity and inclusion, and multicultural health. AMSA is contracted by CIC to support a broad range of immigrant service providers and stakeholders in BC. AMSA is contracted by Citizenship and Immigration Canada to provide support to BC's immigrant serving sector, and AMSA gratefully acknowledges the financial support provided by the Government of Canada to deliver today's event. Throughout the webinar, there's going to be various different polls that our presenter is going to be asking. So we're just going to start off by testing the poll right now, and we're going to ask a very simple poll. How are you viewing today's presentation? So the poll is being launched. And we can see how are you viewing it. So 69% of you are watching the webinar today on your own, and 31% of you are watching it in a group. So thank you, and we'd love to see your photos of you either watching the webinar alone or in a group. And we'll be sharing a photo of ourselves here later with you from us actually presenting the webinar. So follow AMSA events and you'll find some photos from the AMSA team as well. So today's presenter is Diane Lloyd. She is the CEO and Executive Coach of Inspired Results Group. And I'd like to hand it over to Diane right now to introduce herself and to get us started on the content section of the webinar. Diane? Hello, Diane? I'm sorry, Diane, I'm afraid we can't hear you at the moment.
I've got it. Sorry about that, everyone. Can you hear me now, Sabrina?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And I'm really looking forward to the content today and to share my passion for mentoring. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. And really, I come to this today with a perspective of a coach. So my profession is coaching, but I'm really passionate about the idea of mentoring and coaching and my own personal experience with creating mentorship programs and actively participating as a mentor in programs is what's really inspired the content today. So I'm currently active as a mentor at the Gustafson School of Business. And I'm also president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and 3 years ago I created and launched the mentorship program for AFP. So that's the context I bring today, and we've got a lot of content to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and get to it. Here is what we are going to cover today. We've got quite a roadmap to cover. So quickly, we're going to look at the role of mentoring programs. I'm going to give you some definition of terms so that it's really clear what exactly we're talking about in terms of our language today. I'm going to share with you really the meat in our sandwich in terms of the content today is understanding what good mentoring program design looks like. And we'll walk through that in great detail. We'll talk about program evaluation, what some of the key learnings I've had in implementing and managing mentoring programs, and then we'll talk at the end about some of the planning considerations, things you'll want to keep in mind as you're designing your best mentoring program. My intention really is to show you the best practice for implementing and managing a mentoring program. I'm going to use mentoring and mentorship kind of interchangeably throughout the webinar. My hope is that today's content will inspire you to think about how to take this program and implement it in your organization in a way that works for you. So we're going to talk in almost generic terms about what does mentoring look like and what does a program look like, and I want you to think today about how you're going to take that generic information and apply it and customize it into your specific organization. So let's talk about why build a mentorship program. Why would you undertake a program of this nature? And so here are some thoughts for you. I believe that mentoring programs and mentorship itself creates an opportunity for connection between your agency and your clients, certainly, and it also creates an opportunity for connection between people. And as a coach, I really think that the connection between people, the mentor and the mentee, is where all the really wonderful connection and learning happens. So you're creating an opportunity for a connection that may not happen otherwise without your program. It's also an opportunity to build human capacity alongside your agency. So mentorship programs really help people step into their full potential. That's really what mentoring is all about. So I know you're all busy with program delivery, and that's probably consuming a lot of your resources within your organization. So mentorship programs really give you an opportunity to expand your human capacity kind of alongside the organization. And I'll talk more about what I mean by that as we get into the program detail. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to use your volunteer talent in your community, whether you're in a city center or a small community. There are talented people who believe in your organization and who want to support new immigrants coming to their community. So this is a great program design to engage and utilize your volunteers. It's also an opportunity to really create an individualized learning experience for those mentees so that they may participate in other programs that you offer, but this gives them a really personalized and individualized learning and growing opportunity. And that's one of the reasons I think mentorship is so powerful. And finally, I think it's a very sustainable way to deliver a program. Once you create your program design, it's replicable year over year, and I really think it's a very financially and human resource sustainable model for you to consider within your agency. So those are the why mentorship programs are important. I'm just going to back that up. So we want to put a poll question here. And I'm curious, for those of you that are in the audience, have you been in a structured program a mentor or a mentee? We'd love to get a sense of your participation. I'll be really curious to see the answers.
Yes, and it's quite divided actually. It's almost split in the middle.
Oh, we're kind of 50-50 so far?
Yes, we have 58% have participated in a mentoring or mentorship program and 42% haven't. So that's quite an interesting mix there.
Awesome. Well, that will be great, and as we go through the questions, I'll be interested to hear from people if you have some comments in the sidelines to help us understand your experience and add to our learning today, because I know there are a variety of experiences that take place. So let's just look at quickly some of the different types of mentoring programs. And Sabrina, I think you've got control of the slides at this point. So group mentoring is a popular form of mentoring programs, and that's when you're really looking at sort of one mentor with a group of mentees. And so you've got a one-to-many type of program happening with group mentoring. With peer mentoring, you see that happening in organizations or in associations where people are peers, but one peer may be a little bit ahead in their learning or in their experience, and so you're paired together to support one another. Professional mentoring is really a context I have a lot of experience in. I work closely with the Edmonton Public School Board in their mentoring program, and they assign experienced leaders with new leaders. So an experienced principal, for example, with a first-year principal, and they match people up to create a professional mentoring environment. Virtual mentoring obviously really creates a lot of accessibility for mentoring partnerships and relationships, so that can happen over Skype, email, phone even. So you don't have to physically be together in order to become a mentoring partner. And finally, the one-to-one mentoring, that's where we're going to focus our time and conversation today, is looking at one-to-one, one mentor, one mentee, partnered up to engage in a mentorship relationship over a period of time. And that's the context that I'm going to speak about today, and hope that that gives you a framework for considering program design in your agency. But you may want to explore some of these other frameworks if it suits your agency best. So let's just talk about our definition of terms so you know what I'm referencing here. So mentoring really is that special type of relationship when a trusted and experienced individual, the mentor, freely acts as an advisor, coach, guide, teacher, or role model to someone who's less experienced. And this is, I've sourced this from the BC Human Resources Professional Association, their manual for mentoring. So I like this definition because it's pretty generic and broad, and I know you'll have different experienced people in your communities who will step up and take on that role of mentor. So that's the actual act of mentoring. A mentoring program or mentorship program, I'll use interchangeably, is really the organization or agency whose mission involves connecting mentors and mentees and monitoring and supporting this relationship over time. So we're talking today about a structured mentoring program. And I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that there's lots of unstructured mentoring that goes on in organizations and relationships with people, and we often reference, this person was my mentor. And so we know that people will seek out mentors outside of any sort of formal program. And that's wonderful, and it's amazing when it happens and it works well. I believe that these structured mentoring programs that we're talking about today really set everyone up for success because you're creating a program structure. So that's the framework we're going to talk about today. And it's important to think about the difference between the mentor and the mentee. Today, a mentor, we're going to look at as an experienced person who commits to helping another person reach important goals through coaching, listening, advising, and guiding. A mentor does not establish or complete the mentee's goals or objectives, and we'll talk about that. It's really important that the mentee is clear about their goals, and the mentor's role or job is to support the mentee's goals. So we know that mentorship is about sharing experience, being supportive, this coaching, listening, advising, and in your agency, you'll have to decide what kind of experience you're looking for. What does that mean in terms of someone who's been in Canada for a particular length of time or has a role in the community? Each organization will have to decide what experience they're looking for in their mentors. And finally, the mentee. So the mentee is the individual who receives that advice, coaching, assistance, and feedback from that more experienced person, with this outcome of achieving goals that the mentee has determined for themselves. So the mentee must have clear goals, and the key phrase here is they must be willing to be guided. So your mentees need to be open to this process and be seeking this kind of support and feedback and advice from their mentor. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we carry on, because I think that's an important criteria to think about when you're recruiting and selecting your mentees. So I hope those definition of terms help you, but this is the essence of what we're talking about. A mentor is someone who sees more talent and ability within you than you see in yourself and helps bring it out of you. I love this quote because I think that is the essence of mentorship, and the beauty of mentorship is having someone who believes in you. Your mentor believes in you and helps you see your own potential. And sometimes we don't see that potential in ourselves. And so I believe that mentors are there to really help us bring out our full potential. So I'm curious to assess this through the poll. How important is it to your organization to create a mentoring program?
So the results have come in, and they're quite different. So
Okay.
So for 3% have said that it's not important for their agency. 26% have said that it's somewhat important. 29% has said that's important, and 43% has said that it's very important for their agency to create that mentoring program.
Awesome. Okay. That's great, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your comments and sort of inputting into why this is important to you. So now we're going to look at really get into the detail of how to actually create this mentoring program that the majority of you are indicating is important or very important. I'll just get you to hand over control there. Thanks, Sabrina. So I want you to kind of wrap your mind around the idea that there's 3 distinct audiences that you need to plan for within this program. And for each of them, success might look different. So I want you to look at this obviously from the organization level. What does success look like for the organization? So it's important for you to launch a mentorship program. Well, why is that important? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the mentors, they're going to have their own definition of success and their own motivation for being there. And then finally, your mentees, who I imagine that's your intention, is to create this program to better support your clients who potentially are your mentees. So they will have their own definition of what success looks like, and you need to leave room for them to have their own definition of success. So I want to bring this to life a little bit for you. From an organizational perspective, this was our definition of success. So AFPVI stands for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Vancouver Island. So we talked about that. What does success look like for us as the organization who's sponsoring this program? And for us, it was important to develop the fundraising sector and support novice fundraisers in their professional growth. And success to us meant that new fundraisers were thriving in their roles and they felt supported and connected to their professional association. So that was our measure of success, and we, of course, had evaluations and measured that in terms of how connected did they feel to AFP and how supported did they feel as a result of participating in the mentorship program. So talk about that within your organization. Get really clear and be able to write it down so that you know why you're doing this. You don't launch programs just for the fun of it or because it's the trendy thing to do or it seems like a good idea. You need to get really clear on why does this matter to our organization and what will success look like at the end of the program. Now the mentors, and I understand some of you may be using mentors who are professional employees within your organization, which is great. You may also use volunteers to be your mentors. So it's important to think about the fact that your mentors will have different motivations and different reasons for participating. Some may be motivated to share their knowledge and experience. Sabrina, I'm just going to check in that you can hear me okay?
Yes, Diane, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. I just saw that slide there. So the other motivation you might want to think about is, and Sabrina, I think you've got control of the slide deck at this point. Okay, they're going to want to give back to their community or profession. That was a huge motivation for a lot of our mentors at AFP. They were seasoned professionals, they'd worked in fundraising for many years, and they really wanted to give back and share their knowledge and support people who were new to the profession. So again, in your context, you may have former clients who benefited from your services who are feeling that it's time for them to contribute and give back to their community and to the new immigrants coming into your community. So tap into that motivation when you're recruiting your mentors. The other motivation is that you need to keep in mind is that sometimes this fulfills a need for the mentor to feel valued, and that's a legitimate need and motivation for your mentors. So be aware of that, and as you're recruiting mentors, which we'll talk about, It's important to ask questions so that you understand this motivation and you understand what success looks like, so that you can ensure that your mentors also have a fulfilling and rewarding experience. And finally, some of them may be motivated by simply creating a meaningful relationship. And many mentors and mentees, I've seen it, maintain a relationship beyond the program structure. You may or may not be comfortable with that reality, but it's just something I've noticed that actually happens within mentorship programs. And I think that just speaks to the strength of what these frameworks actually create for people. So thinking about your mentee, what does success look like for them? And again, they'll have their own personalized list. Obviously, many are looking to learn new skills. In your context, they're looking to learn new cultural mores and ways to be in Canada and in their new community. It's important for them to develop a network as well. So a mentoring program is going to create a structure for them to actually meet other mentees and other mentors, but feel connected in a network. Obviously, they're going to create a meaningful new relationship with their mentor, and that's going to be important to them. And finally, they're going to feel supported in their growth, which again is that individualized relationship that's going to help them grow in a way and at the pace that they're ready to grow, which is what I love about mentoring programs. It allows the mentee to grow and move and progress at their own pace, which is different than people participating in an educational program or some other program that has a lot of structure to it and forces people to grow at a particular pace. Mentoring allows people to grow at their pace and in a way that they want to grow. So let's look at all of the elements of mentoring program design. So this is now shifting your minds to, okay, I get it, I'm motivated, our organization is committed to this type of program. So what does it actually look like? What are the program elements? And here's all the elements that we're going to walk through really quickly. So we've got the initial phase of recruitment and enrollment of mentors and mentees. We've got the fine art of matching them together. We're going to talk about the importance of a good, solid orientation program or process and an event to launch your mentors and mentees out into the world. There's a midpoint check. We're going to talk about celebrating and wrapping up, and then of course you're going to build in program evaluation at the end. So we want to ask you a quick check-in poll question here. Which phase of the program design do you think will require the most energy from your organization? So take a guess, which phase of the program process do you think will require the most energy from your organization? I'm really curious what you guys think at this point about that.
Yeah, so Diane, I'm just going to leave the poll open for another couple of seconds. It's going, but we do have a clear winner at the moment.
What is the win? Who's the winner?
Recruitment and enrollment.
Okay.
Followed by matching, followed by the midpoint check-in, and the final evaluation. I think everyone has said that the celebration is going to be the easiest part of the whole program.
It's a pretty fun part of the program. Okay, great. Well, let's dive through this, and then you can decide if you were right or not. So here are the elements that I believe constitute step one. So this recruitment and enrollment, which is essentially two distinct steps. So looking at the top of this slide, determining the target audience, what I really wanted to focus on for your thinking here is to remember that there are two distinct audience groups for you to plan for. You're going to plan for a particular process for your mentors around recruitment and enrollment, and as well a distinct process for your mentees. So two target audiences that you need to think about. Step 2 here is to really be very intentional about your application form design. So in the AFP example I'm referencing, we were very specific in our application in terms of asking our mentors for to indicate which particular skills did they have in the field of fundraising. So we listed off all the typical skills of a fundraiser, and they had to indicate, I have this skill, or I don't have this skill, or I kind, midway, a little bit of that skill. And we were also asking about experience, years in the field, and really had a good sense of how much experience, which sectors, which types of organizations had they worked in. And then we did there was an attitude piece, and I think this is important. It, again, back to that, what motivates people to get involved. It's important for you to ask those questions in your application to understand their motivation for getting involved as a mentor. And those answers around attitude or intention really help you with the matching process later on. Now for the mentees, in fact, our application form itself looked almost identical to the mentor form in the areas of what skill areas are you looking to develop, and what experience do you have already, but what experience would you like to gain as a result of the mentorship program. So the categories looked very similar to the mentor application form so that you can match. And with attitude, again, it's very important that you understand your mentee's intention, what they hope to gain by being part of the mentorship program, and ultimately that question of how willing are they to grow and be mentored, that we asked for kind of a paragraph on why you want to be a mentee in our program. So recognizing your distinct audience, you'll just have to decide what the best way for your agency is to assess that attitude piece. And it might be a phone call, it might be a conversation, and not a written application form. You'll obviously have to adapt this to make it work for you. Now, in terms of timeline, in our case, we needed a 6 to 8 week marketing window, and we used different marketing channels to reach those two distinct audiences, mentors and mentees. So you'll have to give some thought to that. You know, how do you reach mentors in your community if you're reaching out to the community at large, or are you trying to appeal to a mentor group who are already connected to your agency, maybe program leaders in other areas? It might be quite obvious to you where your mentors come from, and in some cases it might be an opportunity to widen the net a little bit and bring new people into your agency who are keen to get involved, they support your mission, and they're motivated to support new Canadians as they enter your community. Again, the mentees, you'll have a unique set of marketing activities and ways to communicate to them that need to be customized to your agency, to your marketplace. But all I want to point out here is that there are two distinct marketing activities that need to take place at the same time as you're getting ready to intake on all of your applications. Finally, screening is an important stage. So you've got all these applications, they've come in, and now you need to do some screening. You may, in some cases, want to look at criminal record checks if that's an important process within your organization. I wasn't going to overlay any of those assumptions about what works best for your organizations. This is the part where you need to personalize it for you. Also, depending on resources, do you have time to do personal interviews with all of your potential mentors or your mentees? That's a judgment call you'll have to make as a program leader. My advice or experience on this is that knowing there needs to be some sort of human contact at this stage in the process, because successfully matching people based on a paper process alone, I think, might set you up for some challenges later on. So I do think you have to plan at the screening level for a very personalized interaction with your mentors and your mentees and the program leaders for this area. So yes, many of you thought this would be the heavy lifting in your program launch, and absolutely it takes a lot of thought, intention, and planning for step one, recruitment and enrollment. And when you're, well intentioned at this stage, I think you set yourself up and your mentors and mentees up for great success if you've done this part well. So let's talk about the matching process. So step two is how do you match? So you've done all that great process at the beginning. So a couple of ideas I wanted to leave you with is that you may want to strike a committee, actually. If you have a committee, if it's staff only, it could be a combination of staff and volunteers. I found it worked really well for us when, and we were a volunteer-run program. So I was a volunteer leading the program and designing the program, but I brought in 4 volunteers to sit with me in the matching process. So we looked at all of the applications, and then each of us talked to all of the individuals in play so that we were really comfortable by the time we sat down together who would fit well with who, based on what we saw in the skills and experience, and also what we heard in terms of that attitude and readiness for participating. So I encourage you to think about doing this in a group setting, just so that you have some people to talk and bounce ideas and have varied perspectives about that. This is a human process that we're talking about, so involving people in this matching process to help you make sure that you connect the right people together is really important. So again, volunteer staff, ideally you're really focused on what do the mentees need most here. You may find that it doesn't line up perfectly in the terms of the number of mentors and the number of mentees, so you may have to go out and do some additional recruitment on the mentor side, for instance, if you don't have the perfect number of people matching up. So we managed that, as I said, as a group, and then our next step in the matching process was, so this is how we did it, and let you guys decide what works best for your agency. We wanted to create a social experience and some energy and excitement around our program, so we hosted a Meet Your Match event, and we invited everyone, and the first year we did it, we told them who their match was in advance. So we told the mentor, this is who your mentee is, and so they knew who to look for at the event. The next year, we actually waited. We didn't make any advance notices to people about their match, and we let them find out and meet each other at the event itself. So it creates great buzz and excitement and sort of anticipation around who's my mentor going to be, who's my mentee. And in both cases, we got great feedback. I don't really have an opinion for you on whether matching them in advance is better or leave it till the event. I think you'll know your audience best, so I'll leave that with you. So, orientation process. Now, it was curious that no one identified the orientation process as a kind of high energy piece. So I want to flag that for you, that I actually think enrollment and recruitment is incredibly important, but this is the other key place in your program process that I want you to pay attention to. What I've learned over time is that, here we are talking about mentorship, so we're really well versed in what mentorship means. And not everybody is, and obviously your constituents won't necessarily be familiar with what are mentoring programs. So the orientation process, we structured this separately from the match event, and we brought all of our participants together in a group setting, mentors and mentees together. And we walked them through an hour-and-a-half orientation to be very clear about what the program design actually is for this mentoring program. So everybody understood, aha, I'm participating in a framework here. I'm part of something bigger than just this relationship with this person. And it created I think, a sense of community, certainly, but it also created a sense of responsibility. And we really positioned this as a very special and unique opportunity for the mentees and the mentors. And having a solid orientation meeting really sets that up. So the handbook was a key part of this. Our handbook was the Bible, really, and I could spend a whole webinar just talking about the contents of that handbook. So we articulated the program guidelines. For example, we were specific. This is an 11-month program that you're participating in. For us, it started in January and it ended at the end of December. So everyone knew this is an 11-month commitment that I'm making to my mentor and to my mentee. So you'll have to give that some thought in terms of your program design. Is this a 6-month program? Is it a 1-year program? Is it 18 months? You'll have to decide what works best for your organization and your mandate. It is certainly the type of program, I believe, that takes time to get traction and for that growth of the mentee to really stick in. So I wouldn't recommend anything less than a 6-month time frame for a truly meaningful mentorship program to happen. But you'll also have to think about your own programmatic cycles in terms of how you decide on the length of the program. So that was all extremely clear in our handbook. And the other thing we were very clear about is what are the characteristics of a good mentor and of a good mentee. So back to those motivations we talked about at the top of the webinar, we kind of listed that out, that mentors are good listeners, they ask great questions, they are open and willing to share, and so we gave them some cues and clues on how to be a good mentor. Again, for the mentees, we listed off characteristics of a good mentee. Were open, they were organized, they initiated the conversation, they were clear on their goals, they were receptive to feedback. So that really helped people understand who they needed to be when they stepped into this relationship. We were similarly very clear on the role, and so we listed out that mentors, their role is to provide download their experience, provide information, provide access to a network, and to be open and transparent throughout the relationship. We were also clear that mentor is not a substitute for other relationships in that mentee's life. They're not substituting for their boss or substituting for their a family member. You know, they're a unique relationship, but that there are boundaries around that as well. So we wanted to be clear about that. We talked about how to manage this relationship from a process and point of view. So for example, we really encouraged at the beginning of the relationship that the mentor and mentee sit down and set goals for the mentee to achieve during their partnership. So the mentee would drive that agenda. They would say, here are the things I want to work on. Here is what would be really meaningful for me to come away with this program with. And we wanted them to get that clarity at their first conversation so that they knew what they were working towards as they worked together. So that it wasn't just a, oh, this feels nice kind of a relationship. It was a very intentional and goal-oriented relationship. So again, you'll have to decide what feels right for your clients and how to set up your mentors to facilitate that type of conversation. Goals might not be the right language. There might be something else that you want to integrate into that conversation for your agency. But I want you to just consider that there needs to be some intentionality around this mentoring partnership, and you want to give them the tools to create that intention. That's really my main message there. And finally, you need to provide that information about program support. There certainly will be occasions where mentors and mentees aren't the right fit. The match just doesn't work, or the relationship just kind of fizzles out and neither one is engaging in the relationship. So people need to know who to call back at your organization if they run into a road bump and need some help or support. Who do they call, and what's that process for them, so that they don't feel that they've been launched and then they feel really alone out there in their partnership. So you just need to be prepared for that and provide them with those resources. So orientation, super important, and I want you to definitely plan to put a fair amount of energy into this phase in the planning of your program. So this is the point, Sabrina, where we're just going to allow for some questions. I'm curious what's on people's minds at this point.
Yes, Diane, and we've actually been receiving a lot of questions, but feel free to keep on compiling your questions and sending them to us. We're going to have another time later in the webinar for another Q&A session. So one of the questions that came up is really looking for your experience and your input. What is the best type of mentoring program to use for adults and for youth? Is there one that works better with the other group, like it is one-on-one or peer or virtual work better with one of those age groups or not?
That's a great question. I mean, my experience has been with adults, and I think, I have a bias, so I'll declare my bias is that one-to-one mentoring programs are the most impactful. And so I encourage you, if you can, create this infrastructure for one-to-one partnerships to happen. Honestly, I think it's the same answer whether it's adults and or youth. In my research around mentoring programs, there's certainly some amazing models out there for youth mentoring programs with working with adults as their mentors. And my belief is that all of the juice of these programs happen when those human connections have been made. And so my bias is that magic happens when one-on-one relationships are created. And mentoring programs create a framework for people to connect who would otherwise not connect. And so that's what makes them really special as well. So it's a very biased answer based on my beliefs and my own experience, but that's what I have to share about that.
Okay, another question that came up is, have you had any mentors that went through the committee process you identified? Curious as to their experience. Did they prefer one-on-one or did they feel stressed?
I'm not sure I understand the intention of the question, but the committee members we used, some had never been a mentor before and some had. And for them supporting the matching process, it didn't really matter whether they had participated before. I just recruited a diverse group of committee members who kind of represented our community that gave me some assurance that a variety of perspectives were at the table when we did the matching. So I'm not sure if I landed on the intention of that question, but we can try again.
Okay, another question, and maybe if you posed that question you could just clarify and add some more elements. But another question that came up, which I think is really related to marketing and reaching potential mentors, is what are the best marketing channels to reach mentors for specific occupations? Is cold calling an idea or putting up an ad? We're having trouble recruiting mentors.
Oh, so that's a great question. I think professionals, if you're looking for a particular profession, like a lawyer, an accountant, that kind of thing, their professional association would be a great avenue to reach into accountants who live in your community through the CPA association or the, in our case, AAP is a professional association. So professional associations are great. I also think chambers of commerce are great resources for you to recruit mentors. And any other kind of business associations that you might have in your community would be excellent. I mean, if you could do a talk at one of their business meetings and explain the intention behind the program, what kind of people you're looking for. I think chambers would be a really excellent outlet for mentors. And really it's just that looking at who's your ideal mentor, what's their profile, and then thinking back, well, where did those kind of people gather and hang out and tap into their network? So, and the other thing you could do is create kind of an advisory committee for your mentorship program, people who are connected into the community, and use your advisory committee to help you with that marketing challenge.
Okay, I think we have time for one question, and this is a follow-up to the question that came up earlier. Is I was wondering if the mentors would have felt stressed, as it feels somewhat like an interview, which would stress me out. I think they're referring to the area what you talked about in terms of the mentorship, like intake process.
Right, the intake process. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's all in how you manage the process. So you don't want people to feel intimidated, obviously, or stressed by it. So I think it's all about how you manage that process to make it really inviting. I mean, you really want people to participate. So it needs to feel like we just want to know you and understand you really well so that we can make a great match here. And so it isn't a necessarily meeting a certain, like jumping through hoops or meeting a certain standard. It's about you understanding who they are, what experience they have, what they want to offer, so that you can create a great match for them. So I hope that's helpful, but it really wasn't a stressful experience for our mentors based on what I witnessed.
Okay, well, thanks, Diane, for going through those questions and clarifying a little bit. We still are receiving more questions, and we welcome your questions. But I think I'm just going to put a pause right now and ask the questions that have come up, the Q&A session that we have planned for later on as well, just to make sure that we go through all of the content, because I know you still have a lot of key areas that we want to cover.
Yeah, we do. Okay, so you're going to hand me back the controls, and I think we've got a poll question coming up here. So I just wanted to check in on this, and just so I have a sense. So will volunteers play a role in your program delivery? Really curious to know this answer.
Okay, I'm just going to let that go for another second, but we have a clear decider. Yes, 85% of people said yes, we're going to use volunteers. Will be playing a key role in our mentorship program delivery. 7% said no, and 8% not sure.
Okay, great. So a highly volunteer-led and delivered program. And honestly, I think mentorship programs are a fantastic way to engage volunteers in your agency and for you to expand your reach and your impact in terms of supporting your constituents. So everything that I'm sharing here and my own experience has actually been from a volunteer perspective. So none of what I'm saying here requires staff to do all the heavy lifting. This is absolutely a great opportunity for you to engage volunteers to whatever level or extent feels right for your agency. So I'm really encouraged by that answer and excited for you in terms of what will happen. So we're going to move on to the next slide, Sabrina, while we're transitioning here. Okay, the midpoint check-in. it's important, you know, once you launch your pairs and off they go after a fantastic orientation, we built in a midpoint check-in. So we did this check-in at about the 4 or 5 month, actually about the 4-month level. So I have 2 tips for you on the check-in. One is the idea that they are participating in a program with a cohort, a group of other people. And so we brought our mentoring pairs together and created a learning event for them to come to together. So the learning event was any topic, could be anything that's relevant or even something that's already happening within your agency that you want to invite mentors and mentees to attend together to learn about something together. We bolted on to our learning event kind of a half-hour roundtable for people to, the mentors and mentees, to share and talk about what was happening. And what we noticed when we did that was some of the pairs who might have been a little less active or a little less engaged were pretty inspired by what they saw happening in some of the other pairs in terms of the way they were working together. Some mentors were really engaged with their mentee in terms of exposing them to their own network and their own community. So bringing everyone together as a midpoint check-in, I think, is really valuable, and a whole lot of benefits happen when you do that. Another midpoint check-in method, which you could do on its own or in combination with the event, is to have your program coordinator do a quick check-in call to each of the participants. And just to see how things are going, how frequently they're meeting. You can refer back to your handbook and ask them about particular things that, in terms of expectations that you've set up. And if you get a sense at this point with this personalized check-in that the match may not be working in the way that you'd intended, that's your opportunity to get involved, help them either re-engage as a pair or offer an opportunity to change and maybe switch out the mentor and the mentee. And so if you have a stable of mentors maybe that weren't matched that could step in halfway through, that's an opportunity for you to do that. So midpoint check-in, planning for it, building it in is absolutely essential to understanding how your program delivery is really working. So I'll get your help, Sabrina, in advancing this slide for me here. Now this is my favorite step in the program, and we felt it was really important to create kind of a ritual around celebrating the end of the program. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for our mentors and mentees to come together in a ceremony and have the opportunity to acknowledge one another. And so we prepared our participants for that we are going to ask you to stand up and acknowledge your mentor and then acknowledge the mentee in front of the group. And it was very heartwarming to be witness to those acknowledgements. And what was fascinating about it really for me is time after time the mentors benefit as much as the mentees from this relationship. And that was an sort of unintended and happy surprise for us with our program, is consistently every mentor said, I got so much out of that relationship that was not expected from me or by me. So that was really beautiful. So I believe in having this ceremony to bring closure to the relationship. It also signals, you know, everyone's met their commitments. This is the end of the formal program relationship. So it brings closure, which sometimes helps when people are kind of ready to move on. So acknowledging the closure, and really an opportunity to celebrate the growth of the mentee and for them to have an opportunity to reflect on, wow, that's where I was 11 months ago. Here's where I ended up as a result of this relationship. And then obviously with social media now and creating that kind of a nice, I just think pictures just create that legacy. It's a nice legacy and reminder of all that happened in this one year. And because this is one of these programs that as you're running it, you don't really feel as an agency like you're connected to it. It's something you create and then you sort of set it loose. So this celebration of wrap-up event also gives the sponsoring agency an opportunity as an agency to witness all of the good stuff that happened over that year, because you're really hands-off. You really don't get to see it and feel it like you do other programs that you deliver. So this is an important time for you as an agency to be witness to all of the success and all of the great growth that happened for your constituents. So this is another time that we could take a few questions.
Yes, Diane. One of the questions that has come up is our organization is located in a smaller center, and we are finding that prospective mentors are reluctant to commit for long periods of time, but are fine meeting with our newcomer clients for 1 or 2 meetings to introduce them to the industry, to help them refine their resume and job search skills, and to give them some guidance on how to work towards their career goals. Would you consider this mentoring?
I would say I don't believe in one-shot mentoring. I think mentoring is a longer-term commitment and relationship, because if it's all about the growth of that mentee. So I consider that example as maybe some quick consulting and advice giving, but it doesn't have the essence of a relationship like mentoring does. So, you know, maybe framing up mentoring a bit differently in your organization to recruit mentors and focusing more on the fact that it is a relationship that supports the growth of that individual over a period of time. However, all that really might need is one connection a month or one conversation a month, and then sending them some resources. Mentoring doesn't mean daily or weekly contact, but I think at minimum it's once a month over an extended period of time, so that mentee has the opportunity to kind of do homework and do things in between each conversation. So that's my perspective on that.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Another question that came up really during the time when you were talking about the celebration wrap up, and you were talking about the fact that you create that mentorship program, and as an agency you let that free into the world. The question was, what is your take on creating like monthly or bi-monthly mentee events that would take place within the agency to keep track and to really encourage that engagement between mentor and mentee?
I mean, I think that's fantastic if you have the resources in your agency to create that kind of program structure. I don't think there's any downside to doing that. The other thing to consider is that you, as the agency, don't necessarily want to be in control of every step, because you want that relationship to also thrive in its own way and have its kind of own pace and its own way for those two people to connect. So I think that this question is kind of hitting on what's distinct about offering a mentorship program is that the agency isn't totally in control, and that's okay. You want to create the framework for these relationships to get created, give them some support, and I love the idea of monthly get-togethers, but also creating expectations for mentors and mentees to meet on their own outside of the agency framework.
Okay, thank you. Another question, Diane, that has come up is what to do if a mentor and mentee just aren't the right fit for each other? What are some of the different options?
And that happened with us at AFP, and I, as the program lead, I got those. There was 2 instances where I got those calls, and in one instance, I kind of put my coaching hat on with the mentee and asked her what she needed to be doing about the relationship, where it was getting stuck for her, and by the end of our conversation, she decided that she just needed to be more clear with her mentor about her needs and her goals within this relationship. And so she needed to sort of step up and ask for what she needed, essentially, with her mentor. Her mentor had all the best intentions of being supportive, but she was coming at it from a mentor. Here's what I think you need to know. I'm going to tell you everything I think you need to know, instead of being a mentor who listened to what the mentee really needed. So in that example, the mentee was stronger in that relationship and was just said, you know, I just need to check in and let you know what I need most from this relationship. And the good news in that situation, the mentor loved that feedback. Said, oh, I totally want to give you what you need. I will do this differently. Let's go with where you want to go. In another case, we just had, it was actually the mentee completely disengaged, and the mentor was trying really hard to re-engage the mentee and keep the relationship alive. And by month 5, it was really clear that the mentee was not engaged, and so as a program lead, we called the mentee, checked in on that. In fact, lots had happened in her life. She needed to disengage from the program. We had a waiting list of mentees, so we were able to connect that mentor with a new mentee and give them at least a 6-month experience together, and we've fixed that way. So this is a human process, and so lots of things may not work with your pairs, and so that program lead who's willing to get involved and help find a solution for both sides. If you have the luxury of a wait list with mentors, that's fantastic. And if the matches don't work out, don't beat yourself up about it. It's bound to happen, so make the change and move on. It's really what I've learned about these programs.
So Diane, a little bit of a follow-up question that came to that one was, how are you able, from your own experience and having to change those mentorship partnerships midway, how are you able to do that without it being discouraging or demoralizing for the mentor or the mentee? Did you have any tips or tricks that you could share?
Again, my coaching perspective is that transparency is always the best way to go, and to give people permission to be really transparent with you as the program lead about what's really going on. And you obviously might have to have some awkward conversations or difficult conversations, but coming always back to that piece around fit, and not everyone is the right fit based on all sorts of factors. It could be just personality or the type of experience. There's so many factors. So there are obviously conversations that you want to have a program lead who is comfortable having some of those challenging conversations, who is always paying attention to the fact that you want people to feel positive at the end of the day, but nobody's perfect either. And so there's no easy answer to this question, because yes, sometimes they're kind of difficult conversations, but in my experience, when we were able to rematch people and give them a second chance and the connection did work, that's when their overall kind of faith and optimism about mentoring kind of kicked in. So again, you have to be maybe a little bit courageous, and the key is to do that check-in so that you don't find out in month 10 that this thing went sideways. So good program management is to do that check-in and know that sooner than later.
Well, thank you, Diane, for sharing from your own experience. I'm going to right now hold the other questions that came into our final Q&A session at the very end of the webinar, because I want to make sure that Diane has enough time to really go into program evaluation.
Yeah, so we've still got some great content to go here, so let's move on. Now, I know that there are many program evaluation experts listening in on this webinar, so I don't want you to think I have any particular expertise in program evaluation. You guys probably all have some really good process established within your organization around this. So Sabrina, I'll just get you to help me with the slides here. So obviously you want to be inclusive with your program evaluation, and the organization gets to evaluate, the mentors evaluate, and the mentees evaluate. So you're going to be very inclusive in how you design your program evaluation. You know, look back at what goals you set, the SMART goals that you set as an organization. And I would also encourage you to ask your participants to do some of their own reflection. Did the mentors achieve their goals for mentorship, and did the mentees achieve the growth they had outlined as their goals at the beginning? And check in with them. So the organization has goals they want to achieve, but you also want to check in on, did our participants achieve the goals that they had set for themselves? And adapt and move forward. So you're going to learn a lot, particularly after year one, as we did, and you have obviously be open to that feedback. Make any program adaptations based on your unique audience and your unique program, and then move forward. I mean, my big learning with mentorship programs was, again, because you're talking about matching humans, there's going to be a scale of experience and fulfillment between each pair. Some pairs are going to come through it and tell you that it was the most amazing program they've ever participated in. It was an incredible connection and they loved it. And other pairs will come through saying, yeah, that was good, that worked, great. And others will be maybe a little bit lukewarm about it. And that's really our experience, is that you're going to see a range of enthusiasm and satisfaction from the program. And I think that's perfectly typical for mentorship programs when you're dealing with human being relationships. So here are some of the key learnings that I took away from launching our program, is to expect the unexpected, as you do in all program design. Things come up, things will happen. You know, we planned our orientation event and realized that there was something else going on in the fundraising sector and most of our people couldn't attend, so we rescheduled and did it differently. Again, as I've already talked about, you'll see that there are relationships that just don't sort of spark in the way that you'd hoped they'd spark, so maybe you need to rematch. So just plan for the unexpected. Heavy lifting, absolutely. Year one of your program, designing it and launching it, is always the heavy lifting year for any program. So yes, the time it's going to take for you this first year is going to be more, but I noticed it was so easy in year two to launch our program and manage it. So make that commitment and investment in the program in year one, and I guarantee you will find it to be much easier in year two and beyond. I think mentorship programs are actually a very low-cost way to build capacity for your organization to serve your clients. And so I'm a huge advocate of volunteer delivered mentorship programs to extend your reach as an agency. The structure piece, the program design that I've walked you through, the structure is critical so that everybody knows the structure that they're operating in. And then at the same time, flexibility around how do you adapt this to work for your agency, that's critical. You may also need to be flexible in terms of what happens within your mentor pairs. Maybe some of them can't as you'd established, or maybe they need to work virtually because one person is away a lot or what have you. So flexibility needs to be kind of embedded or allowed within the program. But creating that structure for this relationship to thrive within is your job as the agency delivering the program. So we're going to ask you another poll question here, and I'm really curious at this stage of the webinar is, how committed do you feel to implement a mentoring program within your organization? So give us a temperature read on your commitment level at this stage in the webinar.
So I'm going to leave the poll open for a couple more seconds because the answers are coming in. We do have one answer that is leading, and that is very committed, followed by somewhat committed, and committed is third in place.
Okay, great. It would be really interesting for us to hear from you in the comments section Just that why. Why are you committed, and why is this program important to your agency? I'd really love to hear that from you. So finally, I just wanted to leave you with some considerations, programmatic considerations. And obviously, you're going to give some thought to your staff time. And now, as I said, my experience actually was completely volunteer. We had no staff involvement with AFP. We're a volunteer-led professional association, and so we did not rely on staff to do any of our program elements. That's not going to be your reality. I recognize in your agencies you're going to want to dedicate some staff time to implementing this program. So I would encourage you to look at other programs that you deliver. What's the time allotment or the staff role that makes sense based on your other programs? But keep in mind that once you launch in year one, I believe the staff time required for you beyond year one is going to be lighter weight than some of your other program delivery, because as I say, you're creating the structure, you create the matches, and then you launch them out into the world. Now, if you're that organization that said you want to provide monthly touch points, that's great. That's obviously going to take more staff time. But the other thing you can keep in mind is you may be able to kind of bolt your mentorship program onto other events or other activity that's already taking place within your agency. Particularly in year one, I would caution you on creating 6 or 7 unique events just for the mentorship program. I would encourage you to think of how can we invite our mentoring pairs into events we're already doing at our agency. So that's my shtick on staff time. Budget considerations, I think, can be very low cost in terms of budget impact for you. There are certainly costs in terms of your staff. The handbook has some hard costs in terms of printing, perhaps. You may have event costs in terms of hosting your events. But ultimately, I would encourage you to think of this as a low-cost way to deliver services within your agency and not get blocked or stuck by budget as a reason not to do this. So that's my thoughts about budget, and a tough question to answer because I don't know what kind of budgets you all deal with, but my guess is that this will be a much lower cost program to deliver than some of your other programs. So insurance and liability is something that you'll want to do some research on within your agency. So we did not have particular insurance or liability coverage when we offered our program. It was an adult-based program. It was in a professional association context. So you need to consider your context and do your due diligence around liability within a mentorship program, and just check that out and understand the implications for your agency as you move forward. And finally, I think I've said this enough, but I want you to release yourselves of the need to do this perfectly. And I see this all the time where organizations get stuck because they're not sure they could be absolutely perfect with it. We had to let go of the need to be perfect and just get into action mode when we launched our program. And I'm really happy that we did, because if we sat around talking about it for too long, we would have never delivered anything. So plan as you must and be thoughtful and get out there and do it, because I really believe that this is a very empowering and highly impactful program that you can offer to new Canadians that will support them just in magical ways that might be quite complementary to what you're already doing in terms of services for them. So that's kind of my soapbox about my belief around mentoring programs. The handout that Sabrina has shared with you has a great list of resources that I came across as I was preparing for today, but also these are resources that supported me when I was launching our program. And as I said, there are many ways for you to do this. So find a way that fits best for your agency, for your clients, and make it your own and have fun doing it, because it's a very rewarding program to offer, and I'm honestly quite excited for all of you with the high commitment that you've talked about in terms of launching this, and I think you're going to have amazing outcomes for your people. So I'm happy to answer some more questions to use the rest of our time together.
Well, thank you, Diane, so much. There's been a lot of questions that have come up. One of them that came up was, I've been using a mentorship approach to launch a mental health support program for refugee survivors of trauma with volunteers, psychotherapists, and counselors. This program will be based in Victoria, BC. How can I get access to some additional support and tools?
That sounds really great. I'm in Victoria, BC, so I'd love to stay connected on that. I would highly recommend that you look at some of these resource links that are in the handbook to certainly inform you. I think being really knowledgeable about and clear about what are the expectations the agency has for the mentors, particularly in a high-touch and sensitive program area that you're talking about, just to be really clear about the parameters around a mentorship role versus a counseling role or a therapist role, so that you as an organization are really clear about what you mean by mentorship, so that you can download that to your mentors, and so they're really clear about the boundaries as well. But again, the internet is full of resources, and so beyond what we've provided today, I would just encourage you to even start looking at mental health mentoring programs and see what other organizations worldwide have been able to create.
And just to follow up to that point, Diane, AMSA is also currently putting together and compiling a list of various different mentorship resources, which we will be putting together on the AMSA website as one of our quick links and specialized resource pages. So we'll be sharing that with everyone once that web page is complete. So we're also looking to get your input on what type of resources would you like to have on that page, but also if you and your agency are using specific resources, please share it with us so that we can post it on that site and share it with the broader settlement community as well. But another question that has come up is it best to run a mentorship program in a cohort as opposed to screening and matching people continuously throughout the year?
So my bias around that is that creating a cohort gives you that added program structure and people having a sense that they're part of something bigger than just their pair. So I found that to be very powerful and supportive to the whole framework of our mentorship program. If that's not possible, then I would encourage you to experiment with just creating pairs and launching them. I think it requires then more staff kind of oversight and check-in to ensure that that orientation happens, that midpoint check-in happens. If you're doing it on a kind of an ad hoc as it comes along basis. So my encouragement is to find a way to create a cohort experience for that added value. But if you can get started with the matches one-on-one and that's easy to get started, then I would say go for it.
Another question came up a little bit regarding that celebrating and wrapping up that mentor-mentee relationship. What is your recommendation or your feel on providing mentors with a certificate of appreciation or of an excellence, just really acknowledging their services and their volunteer time?
I think that's a great idea, and I think acknowledging their commitment to their mentee. I heard excellence or certificates. So here's my bias. I think sometimes certificates fall a little flat, and so I would encourage you to be creative in terms of how the agency acknowledges and recognizes the volunteer contribution from the mentor. So a fantastic addition, as well as the mentee having the opportunity to acknowledge their mentor personally within that wrap-up. So that would be a nice two-pronged approach for sure.
And one question that we received from Twitter would be, have you had experience with mentor program pilots? Like, for example, would it take 3 months to establish it and then create like a program launch following that? So could you maybe talk a little bit to piloting a mentorship program?
You know, you could try a pilot program if you wanted to learn from it. I think pilot programs tend to set up a bit of a we're not sure we're totally committed to this kind of a vibe in the community. So instead, my advice would be to start small, like launch your program and start small. Maybe you want to limit the number of pairs. We're going to start small and we're going to launch with 10 pairs, for example, and run it through the full cycle of the program and learn from that small cohort or that small launch, and then do it again, and maybe you want to expand bigger. So I would encourage you to frame it as a scaling question, but it's still a legitimate program launch when you do it. That would be my advice.
Another question that came, Diane, was, I feel feedback from the mentor and mentee is important to determine the direction of the program. In most cases, this is missing. How do you suggest incorporating this feedback into program design?
Yeah, that was that point around being inclusive with your program evaluation. I think everyone should have a voice in the program feedback. So the agency gets to provide feedback, the mentors and the mentees, to inform the program design. So what worked well for them, what would they like to see more of, less of, where did they get stuck? So definitely ask them for feedback on the agency's program design, as well as asking them for feedback on each other. So the mentor should give feedback about their mentee and vice versa. So it's definitely, you know, a multi-pronged program evaluation strategy that you need to put in place.
So, and another question that came up was related to that screening process of mentors. Are there any certain criteria that an agency should be looking out for and be careful of when screening? It was just a question is to elaborate a little bit on the whole screening process.
I think the screening phase is really informed by how thoughtful you are as an agency about your intentions behind providing the mentorship program. So you may want to do some focus group work in advance of launching your program to understand what is it that your clients really need and would benefit from in terms of a mentor, and then use that information to build your application, which would then set you up for good clarity at that screening stage. And the screening stage, again, is really situational depending on whether we're talking about adults or youth and what kinds of, I don't know, security sounds like a strong word, but security measures do you want to put in place with your mentors. And again, that personal conversation to really ask those questions about their motivation for being involved and be really clear about the expectations you have as the agency of your expectations of the mentors and how they'll show up and participate. So, for example, it's not about mentors using this as a way to recruit employees necessarily or have their own agenda show up in that mentor relationship. So that's where the screening process, I encourage that personal contact is critical to a successful screening step.
So thank you, Diane, for preparing and presenting on this valuable content and for answering all of these questions. And I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. It's been a really dynamic discussion. Remember, the webinar has been recorded and we will be making it available on the AMSA website to view online. So please watch out for your Settlement Net weekly alerts for more information on when this webinar can be viewed online. As well, we will be sending a PDF version of the PowerPoint slides to everyone who had registered for the webinar. So before I wrap up, I would like to again acknowledge that funding for this event was provided by Citizenship and Immigration Canada. And as I just briefly mentioned, AMSA is currently working on creating a mentorship resource page, and we will be sharing that shortly with everyone via SettlementNet and email. And I'd like to finally say thank you to the AMSA team, to Bahar Taheri, AMSA Settlement Support Coordinator, as well as Patricia Oko, AMSA's event coordinator, for helping and making this event possible today. So thank you so much. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be sending out an evaluation form for today's webinar. So we would kindly ask you to complete this, as your feedback is really important to help us improve our events and also to determine the content and the subject areas of our future events. So thank you again so much for joining us today. Goodbye.